I always thought the stories about Black Hollow were just that, stories. Tales told around bonfires to spook kids, passed down by older cousins like my own, Ethan, who swore that something was wrong with those woods. He used to say the trees listened when you spoke too loud, and if you wandered off trail, you could end up somewhere no map dared to show. Ethan loved the woods, though. He was born for them, knew how to track, hunt, survive. I was more the city cousin, visiting. Every summer to get away from noise and bills and screens. We'd go fishing, hiking, shooting cans off fences, but the summer of 2022 changed everything. Ethan wanted to try bow hunting, said it felt more primal. I didn't go with him that morning, said I was tired from the drive. But I remember watching him pack, watching him disappear behind those thick trees with that stupid grin on his face like he owned the forest. He never came back. Hours turned into days. The sheriff organized a search party. Dogs, drones, locals combed the trails. Nothing, not a shoe, not a broken arrow, not a drop of blood. After a week, they called it presumed dead. But I didn't believe it. Ethan knew those woods. I kept coming back each month, walking the trails alone, hoping to find some clue, anything. Then last week I found the journal. It was stuffed in a hollow log near the East Ridge, wrapped in a plastic bag. I would have missed it if my boot hadn't slipped on the moss. Inside, the pages were mostly intact, weathered but readable. The last few entries were wrong. Ethan had written about hearing voices, about finding paths that weren't there before, about being watched. And then the last line, scrawled across a full page in smeared ink. If you find this, don't. Follow my steps. It's not what it looks like. I saw it. I've barely slept since. I need to go back. I need to know what he saw. But first, I want to read you everything he wrote. Maybe together we can make sense of it. Or maybe someone out there already knows what lives in Black Hollow. The journal started out normally, like any experienced hunter's field log. Dates, times, weather conditions, tracks spotted, wind direction. Ethan had always been meticulous, and for a moment it comforted me, like I was reading his thoughts, in real time. But as the pages turned, the writing began to shift. On the third day, he mentioned finding a clearing that, in his words, shouldn't be there. He wrote that he knew every bend on that side of the forest, every ridge and rock formation, and that this clearing had appeared like a glitch in the terrain. At first he was intrigued, even amused, and decided to make camp there, but by the next entry, something had changed. He described a strange kind of silence, not the natural quiet of the woods, but something active, like the forest itself was swallowing all sound. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, just wind circling the clearing, as if unwilling to pass through it. That night, he dreamed of footsteps, vivid dreams, where he saw figures among the trees, always far away, always still, but unmistakably human. On the fourth day, he wrote that he woke up with a deep nausea, like the ground beneath him had been poisoned. He found footprints around his tent, but they weren't right. Too long, too deep, like whoever made them wasn't really walking. In the next entry, he drew a symbol, circular, with jagged lines radiating out in uneven strokes. It looked like it had been scratched into wood or stone with shaking hands. "I saw this carved into a tree near the creek," he wrote. "It was fresh, I didn't make it." The handwriting was messier by then, rushed, almost frantic. He said he felt watched, not in the way hikers sometimes do when they're alone, but something more constant, more targeted, that even when he turned suddenly, nothing was there, but the feeling only grew stronger. On the fifth day, he found another trail, one he swore wasn't there before. It curved behind the clearing, narrow and choked with dead branches, like it hadn't been used in years. Still, he followed it. "I don't know why," he wrote. "It felt like it wanted me to." What disturbs me most is that Ethan was never the poetic type. He didn't write like this. These words, they read like someone unraveling. That entry ended abruptly, mid-sentence. The next page was blank, and then the following one, written in a tighter hand. I think I'm being led somewhere, not by a person, by the forest itself. I closed the journal that night with shaking hands. The wind outside my cabin had picked up, rustling the trees in a way that sounded too much like whispering. And for the first time since Ethan disappeared, I felt it too, that sense of being observed, of something waiting just beyond the tree line, listening. I waited until daylight before opening the journal again. Something about the night makes the words feel heavier, like they weren't just read, they echoed. That morning, I brewed coffee with trembling hands and sat on the porch of Ethan's cabin, the woods stretching out in all directions like a living wall. The journal picked up from where it left off, and Ethan's next entry felt more composed, as if he'd tried to collect himself. But that sense of dread hadn't gone away. He wrote about the trail, how it wound deeper into an area he didn't recognize, despite being sure he was still within the bounds of the forest he knew. The trees here are wrong, he wrote. Older, taller than they should be, like they've been watching too long and have grown tired of pretending to be just trees. He camped again, this time by a dried-up stream. In the middle of the night, he woke up to something tapping on his tent, not scratching, not brushing, tapping, rhythmic, deliberate. When he unzipped the flap, there was nothing there. But the tapping didn't stop. It was coming from behind, from the opposite side of the tent. He rushed out, circled around. No animals, no branches in the wind. The sound stopped the moment he stepped out into the open. That's when he noticed something in the dirt, an arrangement of stones, small, pale, placed in a perfect spiral right beside his fire pit. It wasn't there when I went to sleep, he wrote, and I was alone. He didn't sleep after that. Instead, he sat by the fire with his bow across his lap, staring into the darkness and writing by flashlight. He claimed he started seeing flickers of movement, gray shapes slipping between the trees, just at the edge of his vision. They don't break branches, they don't make a sound, but they're there. I know they're there. By now, I'd stopped sipping my coffee. The mug sat forgotten in my lap, growing cold. Ethan's words had taken on a tone I'd never heard from him before. Not fear exactly, but a kind of fatalistic understanding. Like he knew something had taken notice of him, and it was just a matter of time. The next page chilled me. I walked back to the clearing today. I thought I could leave. I really did. But it wasn't there. The trail I followed yesterday, it's gone. I've circled this whole stretch twice. No exit, no markers, just endless trees that don't lead anywhere. That was followed by a crude sketch of what looked like a tree with something inside it, a dark shape peering out from, where the bark split like a wound. He didn't describe it, just labeled the drawing, "It watches." I paused there, staring at that page, remembering all the times Ethan joked about monsters and cryptids, how he'd always been the one to scare others. And now he was the one being hunted. I glanced at the woods, half expecting to see that same tree, that same split bark watching me back. But the trees only swayed gently in the breeze, indifferent and endless. And yet, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe they remembered, maybe whatever watched Ethan wasn't done. The next few entries in Ethan's journal were shorter, less structured, as if he was scribbling thoughts in between waves of panic. He stopped tracking dates, stopped noting locations. The writing became more like a conversation, frantic, raw, like he wasn't writing for someone else anymore, but trying to make sense of his own unraveling. He mentioned the light first. There's a blue glow sometimes, just past the trees. It doesn't flicker like fire. It pulses, steady, like it's breathing. He said the glow never came close, only hovered at a distance, luring him forward no matter how much he resisted. And always, no matter how far he walked toward it, it remained the same distance away. I think it's leading me somewhere, he wrote, but I don't think I'm meant to return if I follow it. The next note was only a single line. The spiral appeared again. No explanation, no details, just that, scrawled in bold ink. I turned the page with trembling fingers, half dreading what I'd find next. Ethan had tried to leave the area, had packed his things and walked for hours in what he thought was a straight line. But every time he took his eyes off the trail, even to drink water or relieve himself, he'd end up back in the same clearing. "It's not just that I'm lost," he wrote. "Something wants me here." He began talking to someone or something in his writing. The entries started using second person. "You think I don't see you? I know you're there. I hear you breathing at night." One passage had a series of repeating lines, the same sentence over and over, carved in deep strokes into the paper, like the pen had been pressing down too hard. "I won't follow. I won't follow. I won't follow." But then came a sudden shift, an entry written in a different tone, calm, measured. "Maybe I was wrong," it began. "Maybe it's showing me something I was meant to see." He described a dream, or what he claimed was a dream, where he stood in a field of dead trees under a sky filled with unmoving stars. In the center of the field was a structure. He didn't call it a house or a shed or even a ruin, just the structure. "It hums," he wrote, "not like machinery, more like music, music that doesn't care if I exist or not." He ended the entry with a chilling thought. If this is a trap, then why does it feel familiar? I looked up from the journal and stared at the forest again, but this time I wasn't afraid of what might be inside it. I was afraid of what it might remember, that Ethan wasn't just being lured, he was being claimed. Whatever was out there, it had waited for someone like him, and maybe now it had me too. I didn't sleep that night. I left the journal on the table and sat in silence, trying to quiet the noise in my own head, but it was no use. Every creak of the cabin felt like footsteps on the porch. Every gust of wind rattling the window panes made my stomach knot, but I kept reading. I had to. Ethan's next entry was dated again, oddly enough, though the handwriting looked strained, like his hand was cramping. "Day 11, it read. Or 12, I think. He had stopped trying to leave, that much was clear. The words were no longer about escape, they were about observation. He wrote about watching the light again, but now from a distance, hidden beneath a rock ledge. "It comes every night now, same time, same path, like it's searching." He mentioned hearing a sound that accompanied the glow, something low and guttural, almost beneath the range of hearing. "It vibrates in my teeth," he said, "not my ears." And then he wrote something I still can't get out of my head. "I'm starting to hear it before the light comes." He tried to document it, drew strange symbols in the margins. None of them recognizable. They looked tribal, ancient, except one, repeated several times, reminded me of a face. A long, narrow face with hollow eyes and no mouth. The caption beneath one read, "It's not real, but it sees me." The entries became more chaotic after that. He described waking up outside his tent, clothes torn, feet muddy, with no memory of how he got there. "There are gaps now," he wrote, "time missing, hours, maybe days, something's pulling at my mind." Then came the mention of the voice. He didn't say whose it was, or even if it was human, only that it whispered his name from behind the trees and only stopped when he tried to answer. "When I speak, it listens. I think that's how it learns." That sentence was underlined several times. I read that line over and over until I realized my own mouth was dry. I went to the sink, filled a glass with water, and stared at my reflection. I hadn't shaved in days, hadn't changed clothes. I looked hollowed out, and for a moment, just a flicker, I thought I saw something shift behind me, a shadow that wasn't mine. I turned so fast I knocked the glass over, shattering it. Nothing was there, Just the empty room, the forest beyond the window, and the journal on the table, waiting. The last entry on that page was one sentence, written in jagged, almost carved script. "It's under the clearing." That was it. No explanation, no lead-in, just that line. The next page was stuck to the back cover with something dark, like old sap or blood. I didn't open it that night. I couldn't. Instead, I sat there for hours, wondering what Ethan had found, or what had found him, and why, after all this time, it had left the journal where I could find it. I waited until morning to peel the final page away from the back cover. Whatever had seeped between them had dried into a tar-like smear, and I had to use a knife to separate them carefully. The page tore slightly at the edge, but the writing was still legible. It was shorter than I expected, not the unraveling final confession I'd braced myself for, but a series of notes, almost like instructions. Ethan had drawn a crude map, hand-sketched lines leading from the clearing to a rock formation shaped like a bent tree. Beneath it, he wrote, "Dig, only when it's quiet. Don't go if it's humming." There were no more dates, no sign-off, no goodbye. Just that final direction. Like he knew someone would come after him, like he knew I would. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was obsession. But the next morning, I packed a bag, left a note on the kitchen table, and headed out toward the clearing. I took the journal with me, using the sketched map as a guide, and to my surprise, it was accurate. I found the clearing by early afternoon. It looked just as Ethan described. Unnaturally symmetrical, unnervingly still, not a single bird call, not even wind, just a quiet so deep it felt like the air was pressing inward. And on the far side, half hidden by brush, was the rock, curved like a bent tree. I stood there for a long time, afraid to move, afraid that the silence meant I shouldn't be there. But there was no humming, no vibration in my teeth. So I dug. The earth was dry, but not hard, like something had already turned it before. Less than a foot down, my shovel struck wood. I dropped to my knees and cleared away the rest by hand. It was a box, not a coffin, but something older, hand-built, with iron nails rusted to black. I pried the lid open slowly, expecting bones or belongings or nothing at all. But what I found inside was flesh. Still pink, still moist. A hand, severed cleanly at the wrist, human, resting on a bed of pale stones arranged in a spiral. I jumped back, nearly fell into the hole. The air around me shifted, not wind, pressure, as if the forest had exhaled just once. I heard something snap behind me, and when I turned, there were figures in the trees, not people, not animals, just outlines, grey, motionless, tall, watching. I didn't run, I couldn't, my legs wouldn't respond. I only stared as they stared back, and for the first time, I understood what Ethan meant when he wrote it watches. They didn't move, not one step. But I felt them in my chest, like static crawling beneath the skin. Then one of them raised its arm, slowly, and pointed at the box, at the hand, and I realized it wasn't Ethan's, it was mine. I staggered back from the pit, unable to look away from the severed hand lying perfectly still in the spiral of stones. My hand, it was identical, down to the scar on the thumb I got when I was 10, slicing apples in Ethan's kitchen. Every line, every wrinkle. It was as if it had been copied, not removed. But I still had both hands. I held them up in front of me, fingers shaking, trying to understand. The copy didn't vanish. It didn't fade like an illusion. It stayed there, real and heavy, radiating a kind of wrongness I couldn't describe. Behind me, the figures remained, silent, motionless, part of the trees, but not. My instinct screamed at me to run, to bury the box and pretend none of this happened, but my body disobeyed. Something in the forest held me still, not physically, but with a pressure I couldn't resist. like a command that came without words. The pointing figure didn't move again, but I felt its presence inside me. It knew I had seen what I wasn't meant to see, or maybe I was meant to. I don't remember walking away. One moment I was kneeling by the box, and the next I was miles from the clearing, back on the edge of the trailhead, with dirt under my nails and blood on my sleeves. I checked my hands again, still there, still mine, but different, cold, tingling, as if they weren't fully mine anymore. I rushed back to the cabin and locked every door, every window. The journal sat on the table where I'd left it, but the cover was open now. A new page was there, one I hadn't seen before. Blank, except for a single sentence scrawled in the same frantic handwriting as Ethan's final notes. "The hand is the key." That night, I dreamed of the field again. The dead trees, the humming sky. The structure in the center was clearer this time, taller, more solid, made of stone and bone and something that breathed. It had no doors, no windows, only an opening, near the base like a mouth in the earth. I stood before it holding the box. I knew I was supposed to bring it there. I knew what the structure wanted. I woke up screaming, my hands burned. When I turned on the light, my left palm was covered in the same spiral of pale stones I had seen in the forest, arranged in blood-red ink or something darker. The pattern faded as I watched, soaking into the skin like it had always been there. That was 2 days ago. I haven't left the cabin since, but the forest is louder now, creaking, whispering, shifting around me. Every time I close my eyes, I see that hand, my hand, waiting to be delivered. And I know, with a certainty that drills into my bones, that Ethan didn't disappear. He was taken, and whatever took him has plans for me too. I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that the journal, the hand, the spiral, it was all the result of grief and obsession, a mind unraveling under the weight of too many unanswered questions. But every time I picked up the pen to write that explanation down, my hand hesitated. Something inside me knew better. That night, I heard footsteps outside the cabin. Not animal sounds, deliberate steps, crunching slowly across gravel and leaves, circling the structure again and again. I turned off all the lights and crouched beneath the window, holding my breath as the steps came closer, paused by the front door, and then tapped 3 times, just like Ethan wrote in the journal. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Minutes passed, then more tapping, this time on the kitchen window. Same rhythm, same weight. I couldn't bring myself to look. I stayed there on the floor until sunrise, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. But nothing came through. When I finally stepped outside the next morning, there were no footprints, no signs of life, only the scent of pine and the weight of unseen eyes. I packed my things and left, thinking I'd drive straight to town, check, into a motel, and put the forest behind me for good. But the road didn't take me to town. It twisted in ways it hadn't before. I drove for hours without seeing a single landmark I recognized. The trees grew taller, the sky darker, until it felt like I was circling something instead of escaping it. Eventually, the road ended, just ended, at the same clearing I had left the day before. The box was still there, untouched. I hadn't even realized I'd brought it with me. It sat on the passenger seat like it had always been part of the plan. I left it there and wandered the clearing again, searching for some hole in the world where I could crawl out. But there was none, just the same eerie stillness, the same trees watching like they knew who I was. I screamed, shouted Ethan's name, begged for something to answer me, and something did. Not with words, with a sound, deep, low, like the groan of ancient wood. It vibrated through my chest and bent the air around me, and with it came a wave of memories that weren't mine. Images of faces I didn't recognize, hands reaching through bark, mouths whispering without sound. I saw Ethan in those memories, standing at the edge of that field of dead trees, holding the same box, and I saw myself standing beside him. The realization hit me like a punch to the ribs. This has happened before. Maybe not in this exact way. Maybe not with me, but the pattern, the spiral, it repeats over and over, luring, guiding, selecting. I dropped to my knees and dug my fingers into the soil, trying to find something solid, something real, but all I found was more dirt. And then buried deep, something cold and smooth, a stone, flat, carved with the same spiral. I threw it, but another appeared in my hand. I tried to drop it, but my fingers clung to it like it belonged. And that's when I understood what the spiral really was. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a lock, and the forest had been waiting for the key to come back. I didn't remember walking back to the cabin, but there I was, standing in the doorway with the box in my hands and mud on my boots. The journal was open again, flipped to the center, where pages had once been blank, now filled with unfamiliar handwriting. Not Ethan's, not mine. The letters curved and bent in strange ways, like they were shaped by something that didn't fully understand how humans write. And yet the words were perfectly clear. Bring it beneath. The path is open. I didn't want to go. Every instinct I had screamed to run, to drive, until the forest was a smear in the rearview mirror. But I knew it wouldn't let me. I was part of it now. Whether through blood, through Ethan, or something older, I had been marked. So I followed the path again. This time, the clearing welcomed me. It no longer felt still or dead. The air shimmered, almost alive. And where before there had been only trees, there was now an opening in the ground. A narrow slope, like a sinkhole veiled in mist, leading downward into darkness. I stood at the edge, holding the box like a child clutching a secret. The spiral. On my hand burned again, red and raw, as if something inside the hole was reaching up to claim it. I stepped in. The descent was longer than it should have been. Time lost meaning. The air grew damp, the silence thicker. I could hear my own heartbeat, but also something else. Something distant and slow, like breathing. At the bottom, I found a chamber carved from stone and root. The walls pulsed faintly, almost as if they lived. In the center stood the structure from Ethan's dream, no longer imagined, no longer distant. It was real. A monolith of bone-white stone and twisted wood, smooth and ancient. The box vibrated in my hands. I approached slowly, and as I did, the structure opened, not with hinges or gears, but with movement, like a mouth stretching wide. Inside, it was not hollow. It was filled with hands, hundreds of them, all severed at the wrist, arranged in perfect spirals across the walls and ceiling, some old and brittle, others fresh. And in the center was Ethan, or what had been Ethan. He stood motionless, eyes closed, hands missing, face pale as ash. When I called his name, he didn't move, but the chamber did. The hands began to twitch, slowly at first, then violently, as if awakening. The box in my arms split open on its own, and the severed hand rose, levitating above the spirals like it recognized the place, like it belonged. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Ethan's eyes opened, empty, glowing faint blue. And in a voice that wasn't his, not really, he said, "You brought the key, now the gate will remember." Then the hand flew into the wall, sliding perfectly into an empty space between two others. The moment it locked in, the chamber trembled. The breathing grew louder. The monolith began to pulse with light, the same pulsing Ethan had seen in the woods. And in that light, I saw faces, too many to count, all staring, all waiting. The spiral was complete again, and I understood what Ethan had meant all along. The forest doesn't take, it rebuilds. The moment the hand clicked into place and the spiral was complete, something shifted, not just in the chamber, but in me. The burning in my palm vanished, replaced by a deep numbness that spread up my arm and into my chest. The light from the structure intensified, pulsing in a slow, ancient rhythm, like a heartbeat buried beneath centuries of soil. Ethan, if I could still call it that, stood silent, eyes glowing, body unmoving, like a relic now part of the monument itself. I wanted to speak, to scream, to beg, but my voice caught in my throat as I realized that the forest hadn't just chosen Ethan, it had chosen all of us. This was a cycle, a ritual, a system so old that names and memories didn't matter. Only roles. Ethan had been the messenger, I was the courier, and the structure, whatever intelligence it held, was the archivist. It didn't kill, it preserved. I turned to leave, but the path I had entered through was gone. Only the walls of hands remained, shifting slightly, as if beckoning. One of them, fresh, damp, identical to my own, reached out from the spiral. Nearest to me, my hand, yet not mine. It moved, mimicking my hesitation. I backed away and pressed against the far wall, shaking until a low sound filled the chamber, a voice that wasn't heard with ears but with memory. It whispered images, Ethan finding the clearing, me opening the journal, the box waiting in the soil, the spiral building itself, piece by piece. And then, finally, silence again. The structure's light dimmed and the opening reappeared. A tunnel leading upward, narrow and cold. I ran, if it could be called that, stumbling through roots and stone until I emerged once more into the clearing, breath ragged, morning sun breaking through the canopy. Everything looked the same, and yet nothing felt untouched. The trees leaned inward, the air was heavy with knowledge. The forest had marked me, claimed something I didn't know could be taken. I didn't go back to the cabin. I left everything behind, gear, bag, the journal still open on the table, and drove without stopping. No music, no words, just the sound of tires on asphalt and my own shallow breathing. I don't know how long I drove, days maybe. I ended up several states away, staying in motels under false names, watching the woods through every window. I keep thinking I see Ethan, on the roadside, in reflections, standing just out of frame. The spiral has faded from my palm, but sometimes, when I wake in the middle of the night, it tingles, like it remembers. And the worst part? I still have both hands, but every so often one feels wrong, as if it's heavier, as if it belongs to something else. I don't know how long I have before I'm called back, before the spiral needs another piece. But I know this. Black Hollow doesn't. Let go, it waits, and now it knows my name.